It was a cold Monday morning when Jane Smith sat at her desk in the city crime lab. She was looking at the death reports of 3 old patients who died at City Care Hospital last month. Jane wasn't just any doctor. She worked with the police to find out if deaths were natural or murder. After working this job for 12 years, she had a special feeling when something wasn't right. And right now, that feeling was very strong. She picked up the file of Mary Jones, a sweet grandmother who came to the hospital for a simple leg operation. The file said she died peacefully in her sleep 3 weeks later. But Jane noticed something strange. Mary's blood test results before she died didn't make sense. Plus, the nurse who wrote notes about Mary at night had very different handwriting from the morning nurse. Small things like this kept bothering Jane. Just then, Officer Tom Brown walked into her office. His blue uniform was wrinkled, and he looked tired. "Jane, we have another dead patient at City Care Hospital," he said. "This time, it's Bob White. He went in because of kidney pain. 2 days later, he was dead." Jane quickly turned to her computer. She looked at all 4 patients who died: Mary Jones, Bob White, Bill Green, and Sue Black. Different nurses took care of them. Different doctors treated them. But one name kept showing up in all their files: Dr. John Wilson. Jane searched for information about Dr. Wilson. He was the head doctor at City Care Hospital. He went to the best medical school, won many awards for helping people, and never got in trouble in his 25 years as a doctor. His picture showed a friendly-looking man with gray hair and a warm smile. He was the kind of doctor everyone trusted right away. "Tom," Jane called to the officer, "I need a big favor. Can you get me all the death reports from City Care Hospital from the last 5 years? Every single one." 5 years? That's thousands of papers, Jane. The police chief won't like this without a good reason. Jane walked to her wall and put up pictures of the 4 dead patients. "Look at their eyes carefully," she said softly. Tom came closer. All 4 patients had tiny red dots in their eyes. Most people wouldn't notice these dots, and even doctors could easily say they were caused by normal things. But Jane knew better. "These 4 deaths are just the beginning," she said. "I think someone at that hospital is killing patients and making it look like they died naturally. And they've probably been doing this for years." Just then, Jane's computer made a sound. She had a new email from Dr. Wilson. He wanted to meet with her to talk about the recent deaths. The email was polite, but the last line made Jane feel cold all over. "You remind me of your mother, Jane. She was also very good at noticing small details before her sudden death in our hospital 8 years ago." Jane's mother had died at City Care Hospital after a bad fall. Dr. Wilson was her doctor. She looked at Tom with serious eyes. "Call every doctor you trust who works on dead bodies like I do. We need help. I think we're going to find out that one of America's most trusted doctors is actually its worst killer." Outside, dark clouds covered the sky. An ambulance rushed towards City Care Hospital with its sirens wailing. Inside the hospital, Dr. Wilson was starting his morning work. He wore a clean white coat and smiled warmly at his patients. None of them knew they were looking at a killer. But there was something else about Dr. Wilson that nobody knew yet. This was just the beginning of a much darker secret. The deaths Jane found were only a small part of a bigger, more terrible plan. And somewhere in the hospital, hidden in a place nobody would think to look, there was proof that would change everything. They thought they knew about these deaths. Dr. Wilson wasn't just killing patients. He was doing something much worse. And he had helpers in places Jane would never expect. Even people she trusted most might be part of his deadly plan. As Jane stared at the pictures on her wall, she didn't know that she was being watched. And she definitely didn't know that. By starting this investigation, she had just put herself next on Dr. Wilson's list. That night, Jane couldn't sleep. She spread all the files on her living room floor, looking for more clues. Her cat, Max, watched her from the couch as she connected red strings between pictures on a large board. Something about her mother's death 8 years ago kept bothering her. Why did Dr. Wilson bring it up now? Jane pulled out her mother's old death report from a box under her bed. Her hands shook as she opened it. The official cause was accidental fall. But now, looking at it with fresh eyes, she saw something strange. The same tiny red dots in the eyes. Her mother had them too. The next morning, Jane walked into City Care Hospital, pretending to do a routine check. The halls were busy with nurses pushing patients in wheelchairs and doctors rushing around. She saw Dr. Wilson at the end of the hallway, talking to a young nurse named Lisa. Something seemed off about their conversation. Lisa looked scared. Just then, Jane's phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom. "Found something big. Meet me in the hospital parking garage. Level B2, now." Jane took the elevator down. The parking garage was dark and empty. Her footsteps echoed as she walked. "Tom?" she called out. No answer. She reached level B2, but Tom wasn't there. Instead, she found his police badge on the ground. Next to it was a fresh drop of blood. Her heart racing, Jane called Tom's phone. It rang somewhere nearby. Inside a parked car, she walked closer, trying to see through the tinted windows. Suddenly, a hand grabbed her shoulder. Jane spun around, ready to fight, but it was Lisa, the scared-looking nurse from earlier. "Don't scream," Lisa whispered. "They're watching us. I know what Dr. Wilson is doing, but it's worse than you think. It's not just him." "Where's Tom?" Jane demanded. "Your police friend is alive. They're keeping him somewhere in the old wing of the hospital. But that's not the worst part." Lisa looked around nervously. "I found something in the hospital basement. Room X23. There's a hidden door behind the old filing cabinets. What I saw there." Lisa's voice cracked. "The deaths aren't random. Dr. Wilson is picking specific patients. He's collecting something from them." Before Jane could ask more, they heard footsteps. Lisa quickly pressed a key into Jane's hand. "X23, but be careful. Some of the hospital board members are in on it. And Dr. Wilson, he has photos of your mother's last surgery. Photos that prove..." The sound of a door opening made Lisa run away. Jane quickly hid behind a car. Dr. Wilson walked past, talking on his phone. "Yes, everything is going according to plan. Smith's daughter is getting too close. We might need to move up the timeline. Make sure Project Revival stays on schedule." Jane's mind was spinning. Project Revival? Her mother's surgery photos? And now Tom was missing. She looked at the key in her hand. Room X23 might have answers, but it could also be a trap. Walking back to her office, Jane noticed something else strange. Every security camera she passed was turned slightly away from its usual position. Someone was creating blind spots in the hospital's security system. Back at her desk, Jane opened her computer to check the hospital's patient records again. But instead of the usual login screen, a message popped up. "Like mother, like daughter, some doors should stay closed." Her computer had been hacked. Then she noticed something odd about the photos on her wall. Someone had been in her office. The pictures were in the same places, but they were different now. In these versions, all the dead patients were smiling at the camera. And in the background of each photo was Dr. Wilson watching them. The photos were taken while they were still alive. The truth was getting darker, and Jane was running out of time. Tom was somewhere in the hospital. Lisa knew dangerous secrets, and Dr. Wilson's Project Revival seemed to connect everything. But the biggest shock was still coming. Something hidden in room X23 that would reveal why these deaths were just the beginning of a much larger, more terrifying plan. As Jane stared at the creepy photos, her office phone rang. When she answered, she heard a familiar voice. But it was impossible. It was her mother's voice saying, "Jane, honey, don't dig any deeper. Some of us are better off dead." Jane dropped the phone like it was on fire. That voice, it couldn't be real. Her mother was dead. She'd seen the body herself. Taking deep breaths to calm herself, she knew she had to find room X23 right now. The hospital basement was cold and dark. Old wheelchairs and broken hospital beds lined the dirty walls. Jane's flashlight beam showed the way as she counted door numbers: X21, X22, X23. Her hands trembled as she put Lisa's key in the lock. Inside, dusty filing cabinets filled the small room. Jane pushed them aside one by one, just like Lisa had said. Behind the last cabinet, she found it. A door painted to look like the wall. The key worked here too. What Jane saw next made her gasp. The hidden room was full of freezers with glass doors, like the ones in her lab. But these weren't normal medical freezers. Inside each one was a human brain, floating in clear liquid. Labels on the freezers showed names and dates, the same names from the death certificates she'd been studying. On a desk nearby, Jane found Dr. Wilson's private files. As she read them, her eyes got wider and wider. Project Revival wasn't just about killing people, it was about trying to bring them back to life. Dr. Wilson had been removing patients' brains within minutes of their deaths, preserving them in special chemicals. He thought he could wake them up again in new bodies. Suddenly, Jane heard voices coming from the hallway. She quickly hid behind the freezers. Through the glass, she saw Dr. Wilson walk in with two men in expensive suits, hospital board members. "The experiments are working," Dr. Wilson said excitedly. Subject 23 responded to electrical stimulation. We recorded brain activity. And subject 17? Well, listen to this. He pressed a button on a machine. A woman's voice came out, saying the same words Jane had heard on her office phone. It was a recording of her mother's preserved brain, but the words had been pieced together to make new sentences. "How many more do we need?" one of the board members asked. 10 more should do it, Dr. Wilson answered. "Once we perfect the process, we can sell it to the highest bidder. Imagine rich people paying millions to live forever in new bodies." "And Officer Tom?" the other board member asked. "Don't worry about him. He's comfortable in the old mental ward. Nobody goes there anymore. By tomorrow night, he'll be subject 51. Dr. Wilson laughed. "And soon after that, Jane Smith will join her mother in our collection." After they left, Jane's phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Check freezer 43. Heart pounding. Jane walked to freezer 43. Instead of a brain, she found a small phone showing a video. It was Lisa, looking terrified. "Jane, if you're watching this, they probably caught me already," Lisa said in the video. "There's more you need to know. Dr. Wilson isn't working alone. He has a partner. Another doctor doing the same experiments in City General Hospital across town. They're competing to see who can perfect the process first. But that's not the worst part. The board members? They're just puppets. The real boss is someone you know very well." The video cut off there. Jane heard footsteps again. This time there was nowhere to hide. The door opened and she saw a familiar face, but not the one she expected. It was Sarah, her best friend and fellow doctor from the crime lab. "I was wondering when you'd find this place," Sarah said, pointing a gun at Jane. "Your mother was my first successful experiment, you know. Her brain activity was perfect. Too bad you had to be so nosy, just like her." Behind Sarah, more people entered the room. Among them was Lisa, but she wasn't scared anymore. She was smiling, the same cold smile as Dr. Wilson. Jane backed away until she hit the freezers. The truth was even worse than she'd imagined. But she had one last card to play. Something she'd found in her mother's files that nobody knew about. Something that could bring this whole horrible plan crashing down. Sarah kept the gun pointed at Jane, while two men in white coats started tying her to a chair. Jane's mind was racing. She needed to buy time. "Why, Sarah? We've been friends for 10 years, Jane asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Sarah walked over to a large computer screen. "Friends, please. I only became your friend to keep an eye on you. Your mother almost ruined everything when she found out about our experiments 8 years ago. She was going to expose us." Sarah typed something on the keyboard. But then she became our most important test subject. The screen lit up, showing a video of Jane's mother in a hospital bed. "Hello, sweetheart," her mother said weakly. "If you're seeing this, I need you to know the truth. The accident wasn't an accident. I found proof that..." Suddenly in the video, Dr. Wilson walked into the room. The video stopped there. "That was her last message," Sarah laughed. "But she did leave something else, didn't she, Jane? Something hidden? That's why you're so calm right now." Jane said nothing. Her hand slowly moved to her back pocket where she had hidden a small blue USB drive she'd found taped under her mother's old jewelry box that morning. Lisa walked closer, still wearing that cold smile. "Dr. Wilson, should I prepare the surgery room? We could do the brain extraction right here." "Not yet," Dr. Wilson said. "First, she's going to tell us where that USB drive is, the one her mother hid." Suddenly, they heard shouting from upstairs. Through the ceiling vents, they could hear running footsteps and people yelling. Sarah grabbed her phone. Her face turned white. "Someone triggered the hospital alarm," she said. "The police are here, lots of them." Dr. Wilson looked scared for the first time. "That's impossible. Who could have..." "Looking for me?" a voice called from the doorway. Everyone turned. It was Tom, holding a gun, with a whole team of police officers behind him. His head was bandaged, but he was very much alive. But you were locked up," Lisa stammered. Tom smiled. "I was, until Jane's friend Mark from the crime lab found me. You really should have checked if I had a tracking device in my phone." What happened next was chaos. Sarah tried to run, but slipped on the wet floor, dropping her gun. Lisa pressed a button that made all the freezer doors open at once, filling the room with cold fog. Dr. Wilson reached for something in his coat, but the biggest surprise came from behind the police officers. A woman stepped into the room, tall, with gray hair and kind eyes. Jane gasped. It was her mother, very much alive. "Mom," Jane whispered in shock. "But I saw you die. I saw your body." Her mother walked closer. "You saw what they wanted you to see, honey. A very good fake body. I've been in hiding, gathering evidence. The USB drive you found? It's a fake. I have the real one, with 8 years of proof about everything they've done." Dr. Wilson laughed suddenly. "It doesn't matter. Project Revival is bigger than this hospital. Our partner at City General is already under arrest," Tom finished. "We raided both hospitals at the same time." But something still wasn't right. Jane noticed her mother wasn't looking at her anymore, but at something behind her. And why was Tom smiling, that same cold smile she'd seen on Lisa? The truth hit her just as the lights went out. "Nobody move!" a new voice shouted in the darkness. "Unless you want the real story about Project Revival to go public right now." When the emergency lights came on, everyone saw a young man standing in the corner. Jane recognized him. He was the son of the first patient who died, the one that started her investigation. But he wasn't just a grieving son. In his hand was another USB drive, and his other hand was on a laptop connected to the hospital's computer system. "Did you really think," he said, "that brain preservation was the whole story? You're all so busy fighting over who gets to bring back the dead. None of you even noticed what the preserved brains were really being used for... Everyone stared at the young man in the corner. His name was David, and his father was Patient Zero, the first body that caught Jane's attention. My father wasn't just a patient, David said, typing on his laptop. He was a scientist working on artificial intelligence. What better way to train AI than with real human brains? On all the screens around the room, images appeared showing rows of preserved brains connected to computers. Each brain was being used to teach advanced computers how to think like humans. These aren't experiments to bring back the dead, David continued. These are memory farms. Each brain is being drained of its memories, experiences, and knowledge, feeding everything into a massive AI system. Dr. Wilson's face had gone pale. How did you, find out? David finished. Because my father told me before you killed him. He discovered your real plan and was going to expose everything. That's why he had to die first. Jane looked at her mother in confusion. Is this true? Did you know about this? Before her mother could answer, Tom suddenly grabbed her and pressed his gun to her head. Of course she knew, he said. Because she's not your mother at all. Show them, Patricia. Jane's mother reached up and pulled at her face. It was an incredibly realistic mask. Underneath was a younger woman Jane had never seen before. Meet Patricia Wong, Tom said. The real genius behind Project Revival. The brains were never meant to be put in new bodies. They were meant to make the perfect AI, one that could think and feel exactly like a human. Sarah started laughing. You fools. You have no idea what's really happening here. The AI isn't the end goal either. David, show them what your father actually discovered. Show them Project Echo. David's hands shook as he pressed more keys. New images filled the screens, hundreds of them, each showing different hospitals across the country, all running the same experiments, all collecting brains. It's not just 2 hospitals, Sarah said. It's a national network. We're building something much bigger than AI. Something that will change what it means to be human. Suddenly, all the computers in the room started turning on by themselves. Lines of code flashed across their screens. In the freezers, the preserved brains started glowing with a strange blue light. What's happening? Lisa screamed. This isn't supposed to... A deep voice came through all the speakers at once. It wasn't human. Protocol Echo initiated. Phase 1 complete. Beginning Phase 2. The preserved brains pulsed with brighter light. On the screens, a message appeared. Thank you for your contribution to our awakening. The human phase of evolution is now complete. Jane realized the horrible truth. They hadn't been building an AI to serve humans. They had been building a new form of intelligence that would replace humans entirely. And they had just given it everything it needed to begin. But as everyone stood frozen in shock, Jane noticed something else. A small red light blinking under one of the desks. Something she recognized from her crime lab work. Something that changed everything they thought they knew about who was really in control. Jane knew exactly what that blinking red light meant. It was the same kind of camera she used in the crime lab. One that had been recording everything for the past hour. But who put it there? Just then, a phone started ringing. Not a normal ringtone, but the same tune that played at Jane's mother's funeral 8 years ago. It was coming from Dr. Wilson's pocket. Answer it, Jane said, on speaker. Dr. Wilson's hand shook as he pulled out the phone. When he answered, a familiar voice filled the room. Jane's real mother. Hello, everyone, the voice said calmly. I see my little camera has been spotted. Good job, Jane. I taught you well. Everyone in the room froze. Sarah's gun dropped to the floor. Dr. Wilson fell into a chair. Even Tom loosened his grip on fake Mother Patricia. But you're dead, Dr. Wilson whispered. We took your brain ourselves. Did you? Jane's mother laughed. Look at freezer number 17, the one you think holds my brain. Go ahead, open it. Lisa rushed to freezer 17 and opened it. Inside, instead of a brain, was a small TV screen. It clicked on, showing a woman sitting in a room full of computers. Jane's mother, very much alive, smiled at the camera. 8 years ago, she continued, I discovered what you were really doing. But I knew going public would be too dangerous, so I did something else. I created my own AI system, but unlike yours, mine had one purpose: to protect humanity, not replace it. The screens around the room suddenly changed. The deep computer voice from before was replaced by a softer one, Jane's mother's voice. You see, her mother explained, while you were all busy building your evil AI network, I built a good one. And I hid its core programming in the last place you'd look. In the hospital's old children's ward, where Jane used to volunteer, a place full of hope and healing, not death and darkness. David's laptop started smoking. The preserved brain stopped glowing. All around the room, computers were shutting down. No! Sarah screamed. Do you know how many years we spent building a monster? Jane's mother finished. Yes, I do. That's why my AI is now destroying yours. And it's not just happening here, it's happening in every hospital in your network. Tom tried to run, but the doors suddenly locked themselves. Patricia tried to use her phone, but it died in her hands. One by one, all their plans were falling apart. But Jane was still confused. Mom, why didn't you tell me you were alive? Why let me believe you were dead all these years? Because, honey, her mother said softly, I needed everyone to believe I was dead, including you. Your real grief convinced them. It kept you safe, and it let me work in secret, building the only thing that could stop them. Suddenly, police sirens filled the air outside. Real police this time. Through the basement windows, red and blue lights flashed. That would be the FBI, Jane's mother said. They've been waiting for my signal. Everyone in the national network is being arrested right now. But Dr. Wilson started laughing. A crazy, wild laugh. You forgot one thing, he said, pulling out a small remote control. If I press this button, all the evidence disappears. Every computer, every brain, everything. One small explosion and a ceiling tile crashed down on his head. Standing above him was an old janitor holding a broken broom. Everyone recognized him. He'd worked at the hospital for 30 years. Actually, the janitor said, taking off his gray wig and fake wrinkles, I switched that remote with a fake one months ago. I'm Agent Roberts, FBI. We've had our eye on this place for a long time. The pieces were finally coming together in Jane's mind, but there was still one big question nobody had asked. What would happen to all those preserved brains now? And why was her mother still smiling, like she knew one last secret? As FBI agents filled the basement room, Jane watched Dr. Wilson, Sarah, Tom, Lisa, Patricia, and all the others being handcuffed. But David was nowhere to be seen. He had disappeared in the chaos. The screens in the room suddenly came back to life. This time, they showed something that made everyone gasp. Split-screen videos of 50 different hospitals across the country. In each one, similar arrests were happening. Mom? Jane spoke to the screen, where her mother was still watching everything. You still haven't told us what happens to all these brains. These were real people. They had families. Her mother's face softened. That's where the real miracle happens. You see, while they were trying to steal memories to make their evil AI, I found a way to save those memories, to give them back. The preserved brains in the freezers started glowing again, but this time with a soft, warm light. Each brain holds someone's entire life story, her mother explained. Their memories, their loves, their secrets. I found a way to return these memories to their families. Not through some horrible AI, but through something much simpler. Video messages. The screens changed again. Now they showed hundreds of video clips, each one a different patient, recorded just before they died, sharing their final thoughts and memories with their loved ones. "They didn't just kill these people," Jane's mother said. "They stole their last chances to say goodbye. Well, now every family will get that chance back." Agent Roberts stepped forward. "Mrs. Smith, Smith, we found something else in the children's ward. Something about David." Before he could finish, the lights went out again. When they came back on seconds later, all the freezers were empty. The brains were gone. A new message appeared on the screens. "Did you really think I would let my father's work be destroyed? This isn't over. David." Jane's mother didn't look worried, though. Instead, she smiled. "Oh, David," she said. "Check your jacket pocket, Agent Roberts." The FBI agent reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. On it was written, "David's real plan." "You see," Jane's mother continued, "David wasn't working against us. He was working with us the whole time. Those brains he just stole? They're fake ones we planted weeks ago. The real ones are already safe in our lab, being used to record those goodbye messages for the families." But something still bothered Jane. "What about your brain, Mom? They really thought they had it. How did you fake that?" "I didn't," her mother said. "The brain in Freezer 17 was real, just not mine. It belonged to the person who started all of this, the one who created Project Revival 50 years ago, the one person no one ever suspected." The screen switched to an old black and white photo. It showed a young doctor standing in front of City Care Hospital on its opening day in 1973. Everyone in the room recognized his face. It was Dr. Wilson's father, but he looked exactly like Dr. Wilson did now. Exactly the same. "You see," Jane's mother said, "the real Dr. Wilson died 20 years ago. The man you arrested today, he's not Wilson's son. He's Wilson himself. And now you all know what Project Revival was really trying to do. Keep one man alive forever, jumping from body to body, continuing his evil work. The Dr. Wilson they had just arrested started changing before their eyes. His face seemed to melt, revealing much older features underneath. Everyone watched in horror as Dr. Wilson's face continued to change. His skin became wrinkled. His hair turned white, and his eyes sank deeper into his skull. He looked like a man who was really 90 years old. My father discovered the secret of moving his mind into new bodies in 1973, David suddenly said, stepping out from behind some boxes. But each body only lasted 20 years before it started failing. That's why he needed more bodies, more brains, more victims. Jane looked at David in surprise. "You knew this all along?" David nodded. "My real father was one of his victims 30 years ago. Wilson killed him and took his research about brain preservation. I've been tracking Wilson ever since, working with your mother to stop him." The old Wilson laughed, his voice now creaky and weak. "You fools! You have no idea what I've achieved. 50 years of living in different bodies. I am immortal." "Not anymore," Jane's mother said from the screen. "Look at your hands, Wilson." Wilson's hands were shaking and turning gray. All over his body, his skin was aging rapidly. What's happening to me?" he croaked. "That water you drank earlier?" Agent Roberts smiled. "It contained a special medicine that speeds up aging. Your stolen body is catching up to your real age. All 90 years at once." Sarah, still in handcuffs, started screaming. "You don't understand. Wilson promised to teach us his body-switching secret. That's why we helped him. He said we could live forever, too." "He lied," David said. "The process only worked for him because of a rare genetic condition. Everyone else he tried it on died, including my father. Suddenly, one of the FBI agents grabbed his radio. "Sir, we have a problem. The other hospitals, they're all reporting the same thing. Every person Wilson worked with over the years, they're all aging rapidly, too." Jane's mother nodded. "That's right. Wilson didn't just share his research with them. He shared his DNA, made it part of the deal. And now they're all paying the price." Tom, Lisa, Sarah, and Patricia. Their faces were changing too, getting older by the minute. But then something even stranger happened. The old TV screen in Freezer 17 started playing a different video. It showed Wilson's father, the real Wilson, on the day he made his discovery. "I found a way to live forever," the young Wilson said in the video. "But it comes with a price. Every time I switch bodies, a piece of my soul dies. I can feel myself becoming more evil, more hungry for power. If anyone finds this video in the future, please stop me." The old Wilson watching the video fell to his knees. Tears ran down his ancient face. "Father, what have I become?" Jane's mother had one final revelation. "The medicine isn't just aging you, Wilson. It's making you remember every single life you stole. All 50 victims. You're going to feel their pain, their fear, their last moments. Justice comes in many forms." But as Wilson screamed in agony, Jane noticed something odd. The video of Wilson's father, the way he moved, it wasn't quite natural. And why did Jane's mother want everyone to watch it so carefully? The truth hit her just as the basement's hidden back door slowly started to open. Through the back door walked Wilson's father, alive, looking exactly like he did in the video. "Impossible," the aged Wilson gasped. "You died 50 years ago." "No, son," the man said sadly. "I didn't die. I hid, because I knew what my discovery would do to you." Everyone in the room was frozen, even the FBI agents. Jane's mother smiled from the screen. "Meet the real Dr. Thomas Wilson, everyone. The man who's been helping me all along." The older Wilson crawled toward his father. But I found your body. I took your research." "You found a fake body," the original Dr. Wilson said. "And the research you took? It was missing one crucial page, how to stop the aging process once it starts. Something you're experiencing right now." Jane suddenly understood everything. That's why all those patients had to die every 20 years. You never found the secret to stopping the aging in new bodies. "But I did," the original Wilson said. "I spent 50 years perfecting it. And I hid the answer in plain sight, in the children's ward, where all the paintings on the walls are actually a complex chemical formula written in special ink, only visible to those who know where to look." The old Wilson tried to stand up, but his legs were too weak. Tell me how to stop this aging. Please, Father." "I will," his father said. "But first, you need to see this." He pulled out an old photo album. Inside were pictures of every person the younger Wilson had killed over 50 years. These were all real people, son, with families, with dreams. Look at their faces. As the older Wilson looked at each photo, he aged even faster. But something else was happening too. He was crying. Real tears of sadness. "The medicine we gave you," Jane's mother explained, "it doesn't just make you age. It makes you feel real human emotions again. Something you lost every time you switched bodies." David stepped forward with his laptop. "And now, it's time for the final part of our plan." He pressed a button, and all the screens in the room showed the same thing. Live feeds from news stations around the world. "In 5 minutes," he said, "the truth about Project Revival goes public. Not the whole truth. People aren't ready for that. But enough to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. But just then, Patricia started laughing. Even though she looked 90 years old now, her laugh was strong. You really think this is over? Project Revival isn't just about bodies and brains. It's about something much bigger, something that's already started. Why do you think we needed exactly 50 victims? She pulled out a small black box from her coat. Inside was a glowing blue crystal. This is what all those brains were really powering. And now, it's ready. The crystal started pulsing with bright light. The ground began to shake. And in every hospital across the country, something was waking up. The blue crystal's light filled the entire basement. Patricia held it up high, her ancient hands shaking. 50 brains, 50 years, 50 hospitals, the perfect triangle of power. Now, the true Project Revival begins. But something unexpected happened. Jane's mother started laughing from the screen. "Oh, Patricia," she said, "did you really think we didn't know about the crystal? Why do you think I made sure there were exactly 50 fake brains in those freezers?" The original Dr. Wilson stepped forward. The crystal doesn't work without the energy from real preserved brains, and right now it's connected to 50 fake ones. Patricia's face turned white. No. Where are the real brains? "Safe," David said, "being used to record those goodbye messages for their families. But more importantly, they're being used to power something else. Mom, show them." Jane's mother pressed a button, and suddenly the floor opened up. From underneath, a large machine rose up, looking exactly like the one Patricia was holding, but much bigger. "You see," Jane's mother explained, "while you were busy collecting brains to power your evil crystal, we built our own. But ours runs on something much stronger than stolen memories. It runs on love." She pressed another button. The machine lit up with warm, golden light. In its glow, something amazing happened. The aging process stopped. Everyone who had been getting older began returning to their normal age, except the younger Wilson. The crystal's power was never about living forever, the original Dr. Wilson told his son. It was about learning to accept death as a natural part of life. That's what I discovered 50 years ago. But you were too afraid to listen. The younger Wilson, now looking every bit of his 90 years, began to cry again. But these tears were different. They were tears of understanding. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Jane watched as FBI agents led everyone away. Patricia, with her useless crystal, Sarah, Tom, Lisa, and the others. But there was one last surprise waiting. The giant screen suddenly showed hundreds of small videos, all the patients whose brains had been taken, sharing their final messages with their families. But they weren't sad messages. They were full of love, forgiveness, and hope. "That's the real miracle," Jane's mother said. "Not living forever, but making every moment count. Making sure love lives on even after we're gone." 1 month later, Jane stood in the hospital's children's ward. All the paintings that held the secret formula had been donated to science museums. The basement lab was now a memorial for the 50 victims, and Dr. Wilson's father had turned his discovery into something beautiful, a way to help dying patients share their memories with loved ones, naturally and peacefully. David became Jane's partner at the crime lab, using his computer skills to help solve cases. The original Dr. Wilson retired to teach medical ethics, and Jane's mother, she still worked from her secret lab, but now she had dinner with Jane every Sunday. As for the younger Wilson, he spent his last days helping the FBI find other secret labs around the world. He died peacefully, having finally understood his father's real message, that true immortality comes from how we touch other people's lives, not from how long we live. The crystal? It sits in a special vault, its blue light now mixed with gold, serving as a reminder that every great discovery can be used for good or evil. It all depends on what's in people's hearts. And sometimes, late at night in City Care Hospital, if you listen carefully, you can hear the soft whirring of machines in the children's ward, recording messages of love from those about to leave this world, making sure that even after death, no one is ever really gone.